mean, okay, let's start again. It's always been like a part of a way of life for me, I suppose, in a sense. I just recognized that how lucky I was to have supportive parents. It's something I always excelled at school. And I think at a young age, it was the only thing I excelled at, really. So maybe that's why, I mean, apart from the passion, obviously, and the fact that I always enjoyed painting and drawing, I think definitely the validation probably did contribute towards me kind of pursuing a career in the arts. Just spending endless hours with my mom, you know, around the kitchen table with her kind of, I think, creating these kind of elaborate art exercises as we went along, and me just really enjoying them and thinking, this is really fun. Even though I'm not an only child, I think I spent a considerable amount of my childhood kind of on my own, playing with my crayons. So I think it's always been a lifestyle for me, a way of life, which I just kind of, fortunately, never stopped doing. I mean, I remember my mom telling me, you know, this is really a tough industry. I gave it a lot of thought, but I figured I could always go into, you know, get a side job and continue pursuing my artistic career on the side. So it didn't really give me that much anxiety growing up. I think in later years, only recently, I've realized just how difficult it is to sustain yourself solely from your practice. Even if you are doing commissions and giving art lessons, it's just a really difficult thing to do. My paintings have always had an existential quality to them, even as far back as, let's say, my A-level work even. And I often get comments, I mean all the time really, especially from friends of mine, telling me that there's such an incongruity between my kind of jovial, very outgoing personality and then, you know, these dark works, so they're quite dark thematically. I think it comes from, you know, a very young age, growing up in such a religious country and growing up amongst friends who would all go to Sunday Mass, and, you know, I think religion is quite a central aspect to so many Maltese people. But, you know, my parents kind of very casually kind of told me, oh, we're atheists. And I think so from a young age I had to really grapple with the idea that not only is there no Santa Claus, but there's no God either. So maybe that's why my arts tend to explore, you know, the darker aspects of the human psyche, and they have this very existential quality. So it's always been incredibly important to myself as a kind of expressive tool. And I guess that's never changed. You know, my paintings today retain the same kind of concerns and anxieties. They've just matured both thematically and stylistically. My last solo show touched upon the Anthropocene. My work often delves into kind of my existential anxieties, it's kind of quite a millennial kind of anxiety, I suppose, that we all have. And it focused on the Anthropocene from, you know, in relation to how humans have affected the natural landscape, but from an aerial perspective, and with a very kind of like abstracted style. My works have become a lot more intimate. I think there's only so much you can say from an aerial perspective, and what I'm trying to do with these works is kind of draw the viewer in and really get quite specific about the concerns I have in relation to everything we're facing politically, emotionally, from a personal perspective, on a global perspective, and how the news kind of really filters into our anxieties on a day-to-day basis. Growing up, you know, yes, I was into Picasso and Van Gogh and Gauguin. Dali as well was another big one, all the kind of, you know, obvious big ones. And then while I was at Leeds College of Art, I discovered Marlene Dumas and Luc Tuymans, and I think Francis Bacon is my ultimate favorite artist. I also love the work of Louise Bourgeois. I think they're, you know, two really great artists who managed to capture the zeitgeist of their times, communicate kind of the violence of their times, which is essentially, in a big way, what I'm trying to do with my practice. That was a really strange experience. I mean, a really positive one, actually. I never thought I could. I had the stomach to be on TV without literally kind of feeling sick, because it was a really kind of nerve-wracking experience. Funny enough, my friend told me about this competition on the last day, and we had to submit a self-portrait as in the submission, kind of part of the submission process. So I locked myself into the college bathrooms and I had to paint a self-portrait, which I managed in under 3 hours. It's a tiny, tiny portrait. And I thought there's no way to ever get picked, but it did. I'm glad, actually, I did that. I don't think I'll ever do it again. It was a proud moment. It was a really fun experience too. The pandemic has had a huge impact on my practice. I'm working in a different country, in a different studio space, without access to the paintings I've been working on in first year even. Ironically, working in a smaller space, I've finally plucked up the courage to go large. I think that has to do with, you know, in relation to the pandemic, everything else seems so inconsequential. All my previous fears have kind of dissipated. I think I've really managed to channel this pandemic, actually. It's provided me with kind of a concrete subject which is universally relatable to everyone. You know, so Francis Bacon had the war, and I guess we have the pandemic. And it's certainly a subject which I do want to make use of in my work and really kind of capture the mood of. It's been one of the greatest catastrophes man has endured in recent times, and it's just changed our lifestyle and our world completely. Well, it certainly has an apocalyptic feel to it. I think on a global scale, I'm trying to channel the feeling of the pandemic, the claustrophobia, the anxiety, the change in lifestyle, just the general chaos it's induced. And then on a personal scale, I'm kind of interweaving a very different narrative which has nothing to do with the pandemic. And it has a lot to do with the claustrophobia of getting older as a woman. So it's an entirely different, but it's kind of like, it's interesting how the pandemic and kind of like my personal life have interwoven. Getting older as a woman and having to grapple with, you know, my biological limitations and what it means for a woman to turn 30. I think it's a really underrepresented facet in the arts. So I kind of wanted to communicate that aspect of womanhood. I think my color palette tends to be very vibrant, more vibrant than that of my peers, maybe. And I'm sure the color palette is influenced by the quality of the light in Malta. It definitely filters through my work in more ways than one. Not so much in these works, but in previous works, I also tend to reference, you know, religious paintings and Baroque artists, and I think that certainly has to do with our kind of more traditional education and, you know, our culture. That definitely filters through. Like I said, I don't really have any concrete plans at the moment for life after college. I've kind of really been taking it day by day lately and hoping that we can go back into the college and you know, paint and resume some level of normality. But you know, at the moment I'm just applying for residencies, group exhibitions, grant applications as well, and just kind of like prepping for life after college, which is a really scary thought at the moment.